23% of recent graduates fail the ASVAB, but by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how to pass it in 2026 so that you can pursue your military dreams. First off, what is the ASVAB? It stands for the Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery Test, and it is essentially the test that tells you whether or not you can join the military based on your intelligence levels. And it is a percentile test, not a percentage test, meaning it's not like in school where an 80 is gravy or, a C gets a degree or D gets a degree or whatever. It is a percentile test, meaning if 100 people take it, in theory, somebody's going to get a 1, somebody's going to get a 99, and somebody will fall in everywhere in between. So they do it as percentile. When you get a 31, it doesn't mean you missed every single question and you're an idiot. It means you're in the 31% out of 100 in the country. However, that is based solely on math and English, which means it's not an accurate depiction on your intelligence, so don't beat it up. It is specifically geared towards math, English, and what the military considers their requirements to join. Now, that's the basic educational piece, but the main brunt of the ASVAB is actually the aptitude portion, which helps you determine what jobs and occupational skills you will best be served to learn, i.e., it'll be break down into categories like mechanical and electrical, which we'll dig into in this video, which says, hey, this guy might be really well suited to learn electrical stuff or mechanical stuff or whatever that is. And so it'll help you determine what career fields you'll have the highest likelihood of success in so that you know what job fields to apply for in the military. Now, a lot of different branches of the military look at different categories in this, but the main ones are your GT, which is your general technical, your mechanical, your electrical, and your clerical. So like, can you be admin job, electrical, mechanical job, or like GT is just kind of an overarching, how well do you learn new things with your hands and stuff. This one test is in fact the educational gate between you and all of the military benefits in your future in a career in service. Okay, now we're going to break this down. Your AFQT score, which is your Armed Forces Qualifying Test score, is the actual, that's the number when people refer to, I got a this on the ASVAB, right? Like I got an 85 on the ASVAB, you got a 30 on the ASVAB, you get a 60 on the ASVAB, whatever that is your AFQT score. Now that score actually has absolutely nothing to do with your job field possibilities. It's the overarching, you just have to break this hurdle to join the military. Now, for reference, that hurdle is 31 across all branches. Now, there are a couple of branches, and I'm going to say this, and you're going to take this as me talking, but at the end of the day, like the Army, that will waive the minimum ASVAB requirement to what they call a Cat 4, which means instead of a 31, they'll take a 24, and they basically do this whenever they get close to the end of the year and they're about to miss mission. There's a couple other branches that will do that and lower the minimum, but 31 is the standard minimum for all service. And then anything over a 50 is what we consider a alpha, which just means you're in the top 50 percentile. Now, the Air Force likes to go and tell people that they only take people who got over a 50. That is statistically not true, but the recruiters try to pad their numbers and say that because Air Force has a lot of people walking in. In fact, fun fact, the only branch of service that has a requirement for what percentage of service members who join have to be an alpha is the Marine Corps, which is not what you would expect. But the Marine Corps requires that 63% or 64% of all applicants got a 50 or higher on the ASVAB. The other branches of service don't have that in writing. However, I will say the Air Force probably has a higher alpha percentage because they have people knocking down their doors and they can afford to be picky to make their recruiters, promotion reports look better. But I digress. That overall score does not actually mean much other than how well you did in math and English. For reference, and I'm going to read this just so I don't mess this up, the AFQT is only based on arithmetic reasoning, mathematics knowledge, word knowledge, and paragraph comprehension. And again, the minimum for all branches is 31. If you pass that threshold, you're good for the service. If the Air Force tries to tell you otherwise, probably just means you weren't somebody they wanted anyway. Again, your line scores, which is that GT, mechanical, electrical, clerical, and all those other scores that we'll break down in a minute, is actually what determines what jobs you get. Meaning, I have seen people get a 40 on the ASVAB and be qualified for every job in the military. And I've seen people get an 80 on the ASVAB and not be qualified for every job in the military. Because you might be incredibly good at math and English, get an 80, 90 on the test, and you're a dum-dum when it comes to mechanical, and you ain't gonna learn it. And therefore, your mechanical score sucks and they're not going to put you into a mechanical job. So the line score and the overall score, the AFQT, they don't compute. They're not the same thing. The AFQT is what matters for you actually being able to join the military, and the line scores are what matters for your jobs. There are three main ways that you might find yourself taking the ASVAB. The first is kind of forced to via the school system. See, while you're in high school, there's a good chance you're going to take the ASVAB. A lot of these public schools essentially, they don't necessarily force it on you, but they offer it as an alternative to some of the other tests that you might take in your junior, senior year, which is nice because if you're thinking about the military, this gives you a spot at school to take it without going out of your way or taking any additional time out of your life. And you can take the test, and then military guys, recruiters, will see those scores and they can call you if they think you're qualified for service, right? The second way is essentially taking it, whether at MEPS or at a reserve facility, with the recruiter. So you go into the recruiter's office, you take like a little practice test. They're like, oh my gosh, you might pass, or oh my gosh, study. And then you go take the test. And if you pass, great. If you don't, study some more. And then the third way is what we call the PICAT. And the PICAT was actually being pioneered while I was a recruiter. It's been around now for a little while. And you can actually take this at your house or at the recruiting station or wherever with specialized login info and stuff to prove that it's actually you. But here's the caveat. If you take that, your score does not necessarily mean that's your score, because they know people are going to essentially cheat on this test. And so you will have to do a verification test at MEPS or with the recruiter with the, ASVAB. And you have to do it's like a 20-25 minute verification that basically just says, oh yeah, this probably was his actual score, to make sure you're not lying on the PICAT. Now, for those of you who don't pass on the first go, don't worry. If you fail the ASVAB, that's your first take. Another month later, you can take it a second time. 3 months after that, you can take it a third time. And 6 months after that, you can take it a fourth time. Now, if you fail it the fourth time, sorry. So you've got to actually study. And I would encourage you to just do all the things that you would do if you were trying to learn a hobby that you wanted to learn. And don't treat this as like a chore, but actually freaking study, and you'll be just fine. Proof of that is that the Army has started sending people who didn't pass the ASVAB to like pre-boot camp ASVAB prep course to take the ASVAB, and they've had a pretty good success rate, which basically proves if you actually lock yourself away in a room and study, you can pass the dang test. Now, here is a warning though. If you take it and you pass and you're like, I don't like my score, I'm gonna take it again, you don't keep your highest score. This is not the ACT. You keep your most recent score. So if you get a 35, you don't like it, you decide to take it again, and you get a 30, you're no longer qualified. You got to go take it again and get above that 31 again. So if you didn't score very well, don't test fate. And if you got like an 85 and you're just that ego kid who wants to get a 90, haha, nerd, first off. And secondly, not important, because you passed. You're good. You're in the clear. The score that matters then are your line scores. What should you actually study? I've kind of hit this drum a little bit, but it's math and English, right? So algebra and English. Paragraph comprehension, like reading and understanding. Here's just like an absolute overview, right? Arithmetic reasoning, which is like word problems, ratios, percentages, distance time, basic logic. Mathematics knowledge, which is fractions, decimals, simple equations, inequalities, basic geometry. Word knowledge, which is vocabulary, prefixes, suffixes, word roots. And paragraph comprehension. Main idea, tone, what is the author really saying? Now, if you listen to me say that and you're clueless about what that means, get studying, go and Google those specific words that I just told you, right? Like if you don't know what a prefix suffix is, go figure it out. There's your basic starting point. And then dig into how these work. So you should be able to understand like past, future, present tense. You should be able to understand intent of of rhetoric, of words, of what that sentence is saying. You should understand basic algebra and mathematics stuff, right? Addition, PEMDAS, right? And if you don't know what that is, go back to school. No, just study it, right? It's basic stuff. Now, I'm not saying it's easy stuff because not everybody's good at math. Not everybody's good at English. I was awful at English in high school. And guess who's written a freaking published book now, right? So it doesn't matter. But the point is, study those things. Again, all of that is for the overall score to get in the military. None of that has anything to do with your line score outputs. And here's another bonus on the study piece. If you're like under the gun, you've got to pass, you just have to do this. If you're under the gun, you're hurting on time, and you've really got to make sure that you pass this ASAP, focus 90% of your effort for studying on algebra and 10% on English, because you don't necessarily know what words are going to be in. You don't necessarily that part doesn't take as much generally for people to learn how to read a sentence and how to understand words. But the math part messes a lot of people up, and you second guess it, you triple guess it, you quadruple check guess it, and you leave the damn question blank because you're a numbskull. Spend the majority of your time studying the algebra and the math portion, because if you understand how that stuff works, you can do the problems while you're in the test. And then if you're really worried more about the job scores, like you just know you're going to crush the ASVAB, spend a little time working on mechanical and electrical stuff for an aptitude test, and that information will help you with boosting those line scores for job qualifications. A couple of core resources for studying. The very first one, and I know this works because I used to give it out. We had a couple copies in the office. We would give it to people who were thinking about joining the military. ASVAB for Dummies. I know you're like, I'm not a dummy. I don't care. Read the book. Use the book. Study the book. Actually spend an hour a day prepping with that book. Go get ASVAB for Dummies and use it to study, because it has everything you need to pass the ASVAB in the book in more detail than I'm going to be able to give you in one video. There's also quite a few different companies that will help you study online. Now, I'm not going to give you a specific company because I don't have any affiliate plugs. I'm not trying to make money off you guys going to study for the ASVAB, but one of the ones that I used to use was like 4tests, like the number 4tests.com was like a freebie study guide. There are a lot of different resources out there to help you study the ASVAB. If you want to go the online course way or the online way, honestly, I would just go talk to a recruiter in your area and say, what do you recommend? Because they might have a copy of ASVAB for Dummies in the office, but they're going to have resources because it's in their best interest for you to pass the ASVAB. So they will give you like the best up-to-date gouge on what they see people actually using successfully. So go ask them. Now, there are practice tests. I wouldn't recommend that right off the bat, but there are some official DoD practice tests to kind of see how you're doing. So do a bunch of prep work and then go check out one of these practice tests. You can also use different apps like Quizlet. Quizlet most likely, in fact, I know it does, has quite a few different options for studying for the ASVAB and is probably worth checking out. The end goal here is build reps, build basic fundamentals so that the test feels easy. So go in there for the math fundamentals, really focus on fractions, decimals, percentages, how to convert between them, ratios and proportions, solving for x in simple equations, area, perimeter, volume of basic shapes, and how to calculate them, right? Practice that stuff without a calculator, because yes, I know you can use your phone for everything, but you're going to get paper and a number 2 pencil, and that's it. So practice it without a calculator. And don't worry, nobody's going to come over your shoulder and ask you to show the work to get the answer right. If you get the answer right, nobody cares about your work. So use it or don't, but get good at doing it without a calculator. For your English fundamentals, you should practice things with your daily vocab, like really focusing on learning prefixes and roots, i.e. pre equals before, anti equals against, mal equals bad, like practice or malpractice, geo equals earth, bio equals life, circum equals around. So instead of navigate, circumnavigate, right? These are prefixes. Now you're going to want to know like the 50 to 75 common roots. These are worth 10 to 20 extra points over time, but understanding that these prefixes and suffixes make will help you in the long run on this test. For the reading side, you really just want to focus on looking for clue words like however, therefore, in summary, primarily. These are usually near the answer. And you also want to practice finding the main idea in a sentence, in a paragraph, so that you can articulate what that point was that they're trying to drive home. Okay, now if I'm you, I would look at just a 2-track way to study on this. So strength building and practice test. Pick 1 to 2 weak topics, whether that's fractions, paragraph comprehension, whatever, and then go and deep dive watching explanations, reading the chapters on it. Do 10 to 20 practice questions, practice problems, focus on those 1 skills, and then review every question you miss. Rework, figure out where you went wrong, and make sure you understand the concept. So go deep on 1 or 2 pieces and then move on the next day to 1 or 2 pieces. Don't just study the blanket all across. When you feel good about it, go take a timed test on one of those sections and see how you're doing. Go take a practice test. You could do this with your recruiter's office or whatever and kind of see where you're at. But I would really focus on just going like day by day, 1 or 2 topics and going deep rather than doing across the board. If you've got 6 months, do 20 to 30 minutes a day focusing on math, English, and vocabulary. And just do that as long as you can. And then as you get a little closer, maybe you do like the specific skills on the areas that you're weak. So you're like, man, I'm really struggling on, Algebra 1, basic fundamentals of decimals. Great. Go study on decimals of Algebra 1, right? And deep dive that a couple days a week as you lead up to taking the test. If you only have like 4 to 8 weeks, then go, like an hour or 2 a day and heavy focus on your weakest areas. So just specifically work on your weakest spots. You don't want to try to, like, if you crush algebra, then focus on the English. If you crush English, focus on the algebra. You shouldn't be doing all of this focused on, like, you don't want to just work on bolstering your strengths. You want to work on the spots that are weak. Now, look, if you're within 2 weeks of taking this thing and you're in emergency mode, drop everything and only work on the AFQT pieces, meaning algebra and English. And I would spend probably, if you've got 2 weeks, 10 days on algebra and 4 days on English. And I would break it into like 1 day's prefix, 1 day's suffix, 1 day's, paragraph comprehension, and 1 day's just basic vocabulary stuff. Boom, there's your English. And then on the algebra side, 1 day's decimals, 1 day's percentages, 1 day's finding for X, right? Like, figure out which pieces you're weak at and give them an extra day or two, and then do a day on each subject. And then on the last day, kind of a brief overview. A couple of study habits that'll actually help you with this. The first is get off your freaking phone. Turn it off, put it somewhere else, ignore your phone. You don't need it for any of this. You don't need it for algebra. You don't need it for calculations. Pen, paper, pencil, computer, book, whatever, but don't let the phone be a distraction. You don't need to be texting Jody or your girlfriend or whoever. Just actually focus, because this matters. Use like maybe 20 to 30 minute like focus break with like a 5-10 minute break, right? So like focus for 20-30 minutes, take 5 or 10, focus again for 20-30, take 5 or 10. You don't have to just sit down for 2 hours. You'll start going crazy. I would suggest you study at the same time and study somewhere clean, right? Like not a messy room, not a super chaotic, loud, crazy situation. Just focus somewhere like a room with like no windows, no distractions, nothing but like the computer, the book, and you is probably your best bet. Use a timer, and every 15 minutes ask yourself, what did I just do? And if the answer is TikTok, girlfriend, YouTube rabbit hole, reset, refocus, and go again. But if the answer is, I worked on this piece, then great. Give yourself a few minutes, go back and revisit what you learned, and then move on to something else. And at the end of the day, if you're really struggling on this, the ASVAB should be your number one priority in life to pass this, so you can gain access to that career you want, those benefits you want, that lifestyle that you want. So take all the other things and put them off as distractions and focus on the ASVAB. That is the alligator closest to the boat if you're not sure you're going to pass. So real quick, we're going to talk through your learning styles, right? You got visual, auditory, reading, writing, kinesthetic. So if you're visual, you should watch worked examples and diagram. If you're auditory, you should watch explanations and YouTube breakdowns. If you're reading/writing, notes, books, rewriting problems. If you're kinesthetic, take a lot of quizzes and hands-on practice tests. Basically, you should know how you learn best and lean into that. So if you're a visual person, or somebody who likes to learn by auditory, you probably don't want to read ASVAB Guide for Dummies. But if you're kinesthetic, that might work. But if you're writing, that might work best for you. A really good trick here is to find a couple different friends from the recruiter who are all in the same boat and study together, hold each other accountable, work on this together. In fact, when I was being recruited, I actually got a little bit of bonus points towards my rank with enlistment because I was helping tutor people who were struggling on the ASVAB to help my recruiter out. And I got a couple of them to pass. And then my recruiter said that I brought them in as a, recommendation and helped, it hooked me up a little bit towards future promotions, but it also helped people who weren't passing the ASVAB pass the ASVAB so that they could have that career and that life. And look, again, your environment and your support group can make or break this. If you've got a million friends who don't care about your goals and they're distracting you all the time, that's going to hamper you. But if you are in a quiet space with 2 or 3 other buddies, maybe you go to the library and you guys are actually focusing and holding each other accountable to studying for this, you have a much higher likelihood of passing the ASVAB. Now we're going to give you a couple tips and tricks while you're actually taking the test to kind of have a higher impact and help you overcome this, especially if you're a nervous test taker. I got lucky. I've always been good at tests. I've always been able to just kind of, feel it out, even if I didn't pay any attention in class, because I wasn't one to be really good in class, but I did well on tests. And so these are just a couple tips and tricks. Not saying you should do this instead of studying, but this will help you if you're nervous and you get in your own head while you're in the test. Elimination is the first tip or trick here, right? If there's 4 questions, multiple choice, like most of the ASVAB, go ahead and just immediately kill 2 that you know are absolutely wrong. You're just like, wow, I know it's not these 2. Now, even if you're guessing, you have a 50% chance of being right instead of 25%, which means you're going to do better on the test statistically. For the algebra side, plug in numbers. If it's multiple choice and there's answers, right? Instead of just doing the problem, coming up with a number, and then going for it, plug the numbers back into the problem to see if they work. So work backwards from what you think. Now, the ASVAB, it does hurt you if you just don't get to questions. So if you get stuck on one, skip it, move on, and come back to it. Don't linger there for too long. If you just don't know and you don't want to guess, then move on from it and make a note and come back to it so that you can answer it when, like, you get 90% of the questions answered correctly, and then you've got the last 10% to spend time on, so you don't get hung up on a problem, end up missing 10 questions on the end of that section, and you get them all wrong because you missed them. On the paper test, there's no penalty for wrong answers, so make sure you don't leave anything blank. Like, just do what you know, and then if you can't figure out the last 3 questions, guess. Just fill something in. In the reading section, use clue words like however or primarily or whatever, and understand what those words mean and how they affect a sentence so that you can have a better way to just guess on the answer. Some test day optimization stuff here, right? During the week of, get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, be hydrated, be functionally at your best, eat well, hydrate, sleep well, like be rested, be optimized so that your brain is ready to function and not tired. On the morning of, eat a high-protein, low-carb breakfast, not like overdo it. Don't make yourself sluggish by just eating all the carbs in the world. And maybe if you have enough time, go for a light walk, like a light activity, do some push-ups, something to get the blood flowing and get yourself woken up and be clear. I wouldn't do a super sugary breakfast and have a crash. I probably wouldn't overdo the caffeine and be jittery and all over the place. You want to be kind of clean energy, awake and focused. Maybe you should go to the bathroom right before you take the test, so you're not sitting there trying to pee the whole test, because you're not getting out to walk out in the middle of it. So make sure you're good. And again, no calculator, and once you sit down, you're there till you finish. So be ready to sit down and take the test and be able to focus, and then be good and practice without having to use the calculator so that you're not nervous. And look, a ton of people are bad at tests. It's normal. Don't beat yourself up. Don't get in your head. Don't be harsh on yourself. Just do your best. Right? And don't second guess yourself on the test. If you know an answer, answer it. Don't answer it and then second guess, triple guess, whatever, and get to a point where you're changing your answers. Just stick to that answer. Oh, and here's a tip or trick. I'm not saying this is the case for the ASVAB, but for everything else in the military, if there is an answer that's all of the above or none of the above, that's probably the right answer. But again, don't trust me on that. Do your own homework, do your own studying. If you start stressing out, take some breaths. You've got time. Take a moment, take a pause, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. That's called box breathing. Or breathe in for a count of 5, breathe out for a count of 5. Do some slow breathing, focus on your breath, and reset your nervous system. And don't let one bad question eat at you too much. Don't get in your head. If you don't get in your head, you'll be fine. Just don't worry about it. Don't stress it. You'll be okay. Look, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to start to be great, right? You don't need to this thing has very little to no bearing on your actual life in the military. I didn't even know my ASVAB score until I became a recruiter, and I looked it up in the training section where they were teaching us how to look this stuff up. I had no idea what my ASVAB score was. It does not freaking matter once you're in the military. This is just a pass, a hurdle to get in. Hey, and look, if you fail or get a low score, that's fine. Now you know where you're struggling. Study on those areas. Take it again. You've got 3 more attempts. You'll be okay. Now look, passing the ASVAB, step 1. The real game is using the military to build wealth and freedom, right? So if you haven't done so yet, scan this QR code and download a free copy of my best-selling book, The No BS Guide to Military Life, and let's help point you in the right direction once you're in to actually maximize your career and spend and use your money wisely to set yourself up for a long life of success. That book is everything I wish I'd known about joining the military before I joined the military. All right, I hope you got something out of this. I know we didn't dig too much into the line scores. It's because every single branch has different ways they calculate, right? The Marine Corps is mechanical, electrical, general, technical, and clerical. Every other branch has all these wonky things, but at the end of the day, none of those, like your nuke score or your this score or your none of those scores for other branches and all the different line items actually change passing the ASVAB. Those are your job requirements, and every branch interprets it a little bit differently. But what this video is really focusing in on is helping you pass so that you can join the military. If you want, and you comment enough on it down below, maybe I'll make a video dropping out or deep diving all the different line scores and how the branches look at them. But ultimately, that has no bearing on whether or not you get to join the military, just on job selection, and that changes periodically. So we want to focus on you passing, right? And I can sum it all up as this: actually study algebra and English, and you'll be fine. Don't stress it out. Don't overthink it. You'll be good. Love you guys. Have a great day.